Well, friends, we get started with the second session of the series on the discounted cash flow. In the previous session, we had discussed about the parametric analysis of DCF outflows, wherein we summarized on the working capital consolidation and importance of quartiles in a time series models and the need to learn from the peers in a given project and understand the cash flows in a time series in real terms to enable us to predict the future and then bring in the domain experts at strategic levels to figure out the areas of focus and areas of concentration for ensuring that the fluctuation bandwidth is on a narrower plane in the across the time series over the quartiles. Now we would change our focus to the parametric analysis of DCF, the discounted cash flow inflows, and I would like to bring to your notice to focus on first the cash flow parameters, the CA parameters and inflows, before we move on to understand the dynamics of the resultant cash flows. So we are looking at the first parameter is obviously the sales. Over here, I have included the notional credit sales in the period under observation because primarily in the conventional sense of fund flow mechanism, credit sales is usually not included, and we are concentrating and focusing only on the cash sales. But from a comprehensive get a comprehensive understanding of the nature of the cash flows over the timeline, we have to now focus on even include the credit sales. Focus on including credit sales because notionally the credit and cash sales together make up for the inflows within the given quarter or within the given time period. I beg your pardon, it doesn't never constitute as a quarter, as a financial quarter in the conventional sense, as a quartile in the time series model. I hope this is very clarified to a large extent, and we need to be very careful in using the right term in our understanding. So going with the assumption that the cumulative sales has to be included in the time series, we first include the variable within the parameter. The first parameter total sales, the variable is credit sales and cash sales, and then we move on to the realized sales. What exactly is a realized sale? Realized sale is a figure that translates into confirmed valuation of the goods that have moved or that are booked, and the valuation has been realized. In certain cases, in very many cases, I would say the credit sales do not actually materialize because of n number of reasons influenced by the micro enterprises amongst the clientele, or even the functionality of the fundamental macroeconomic indicators that might intervene with the projected cash flows in a futuristic time frame. So to allow for contingency and reduction in credit sales, we look at another important variable in the parameter, which would essentially mean realized sales or sales that actually gets translated into valuation of the finished goods in real terms. Then we move on into the next parameter, which obviously is the sundry short-term debtors, and then where you are expecting the money to come in when you liquidate your debt, or when the debt, short-term debt gets liquidated. And then you have the very important function, the functionality of the quality of goods being produced in the project, goods or services being produced in the project. And in this illustration, we have included, if you remember well, we have included we have the study on the polymer industry, which otherwise known as the plastic industry, where the polymers are extruded into multiple products through the molding processes. In that kind of industry, the return of goods is a feasibility, is a possibility, and it does do the denting on the projected cash flows, and therefore is an important variable in the scheme of things. We now moving to something called the redundant inventory that has been rejected for quality downgrades, or have been termed as a functional reject during the process itself, during the business process itself. And therefore, valuation of the redundant inventory is a critical component in the cash flow mechanism for the inflows, for comprehensively understanding the quality of inflows. We move on into the next variable, and that is unrealized sales of finished goods inventory, which again is a cancellation implication of the cancellation of finished goods invoices, or for a systemic dysfunction, or goods that are produced in excess of the sale orders. In short, we have to account for the inventory of finished goods that have not gone into the sale process and are awaiting either a conversion into confirmed sales, or have been produced in excess but of the right quality and are ready for conversion. Unlike the goods that are returned because of quality issues or for redundant inventory, these are deemed as good quality inventory and are awaiting the conversion into sales. The next component is new product sales, products which are produced through innovation cycles, mechanism to generate the new product sales is a reflection on the capacities of the companies to innovate and diversify into allied products in a much more efficient way that will diversify the basket and project a superior brand image for the product range. And hence, new product sale component is a critical parameter in the matrix for the cash flows, or the discounted cash flows for the inflows, or cash inflows, so to speak. And of course, we also look into the new product inventory. By extension, the new product inventory, if it is swelling, it would essentially mean that the focus of the company, focus of the project is positively on generating innovative products and causing a mini disruption in the marketplace, and causing some paradigm shifts into the sales strategy, into the generating the revenues for the project. Therefore, in considering the inflows for discounted DCF model, we really have to look into the quality, intrinsic quality of the product, and the capacities of the management teams and the project teams to innovate in the business process and create product engineering and generate product engineering initiatives to roll out products that have a future market potential and have a source of additional revenue apart from the products that are termed as bread and butter products. So innovative products and their inventory would be a commentary on the capacities of the product to sustain itself over a longer time series model, and hence is a critical parameter in generating the futuristic projections for the discounted cash inflows. As in the earlier session, we are mentioned the quartile 1, 2, 3, and 4, something similar to what we discussed for outflows. And this is basically an epoch in the time series projected and is done founded on the survey of the top 5 to 10 percentile of the peers who have been operating within the given domain that one would like to see the investment come in. Therefore, although it's a futuristic projection, but it is grounded on the realities amongst the peers, and therefore we see as in this illustration for the polymer industry, we see an escalation of the inflows from $175,000 to 195 in the quarter 2, quarter 3 to 45, and a substantial improvement in the cash flows over the time series. And then we also look at the quantum of realized sales, how the realized sales are going in, and so primarily we are looking at realized sales as a function of the differential between the total sale projection and the actual summation of the sales that have been put in the order books in valuation terms and have converted into real-time valuation. So the concept of realized sales is a statement of valuation of the finished good inventory and is a critical component in the analysis of the discounted cash inflows. So in this illustration, we notice that initially the realized sales was 22.9%, and then it dipped to 16.6. Again, it was 29%, and then it went down to 16%. So this kind of fluctuation is possibly because of the intervention of the macroeconomic indicators of aggregation of purchase, aggregation of demand, and possibly also the lending rate and the deposit rate would actually account for the real income in the system. When the real income in the system dips, the aggregate demand also might be correlated to the real income, and depends on the quality of the product and also more importantly on the configuration of the product. So depending on the configuration and the quality of the product, we see a further dip in the aggregate demand and the aggregate purchase, and therefore it gets reflected into the realized sales as a percentage of the total projected sales. Consequently, the focus and the concentration of the investors in the project and the project analysts and the financial analysts in the projects need to be constantly hovering around the realized sales as a percentage and explore the causal links leading to these kind of fluctuations. And the domain expertise is required to evaluate economic scenario, the macroeconomic scenario in the context of the project, and the configuration of the product in terms of pricing mechanism and pricing equilibrium, and understanding the dynamics of the aggregate demand and the aggregate purchase to bring about this realized sales. Hence, the work the experts, the domain experts, is cut out very clearly in this analysis. The experts are required to convert this realized sales into a framework of a higher predictability and a higher threshold of lower bandwidth. Primarily, we are looking at bandwidth of fluctuation, which needs to be much lower in case of realized sales, so that the projections are more realistic and more predictable, and we do not suffer from systemic shocks during the time series taken into consideration. So in this K analysis, it is very pertinent to evaluate the time series models of the peers, the top 10 percentile peers in the domain over the last maybe 30 to 40 quarters or 50 quarters, construct the time series, see the amount of fluctuation in the realized sales over the timelines, and explore the possible reasons for those kind of fluctuations and create a decision tree even before the project gets on stream. So in order to have a realistic view of the discounted cash flow mechanism, we really need to focus on the empirical values, and also need to figure out the causal links to the past fluctuations, and find out a way to insulate the project from the vagaries of these kind of the causal links leading to the fluctuations in a very important parameter, that is the realized sales. And when we focus on the debtors and the goods returned, the next area of our concern is obviously debtors, but you need to have a provide for defaults among debtors. Even here, you need to look at the macroeconomic scenario of lending rates and the deposit rates, which will primarily determine the profile of the debtors and the capacities to possibly look at the quantum of fluctuation within in the time series. In this particular illustration, I have given out figures which are by and large constant, which are actually constant, at 29%. But in reality, it might not be the case, because it could be given to volatility, but fundamentally on riding on the factors influencing the macroeconomic concepts or macroeconomic states. With changing states in the macroeconomic fundamentals, the profile of debtors might change, and the profile and the capacities to repay might change as well. Now we move on into the next component, that is goods return and redundant inventory, and potentially the unrealized sales. All these three variable parameters revolve around the fundamental concept of production efficiency, cost of conversion, quality leadership to be achieved, and more importantly, the perception of quality that needs to be transmitted right from the outset into the brand strategy. All of these require painstaking work and painstaking analysis right from the beginning of the project. It needs a lot of strength in terms of available expertise in the project to ensure that the percentage of goods return and the commensurate percentage of redundant inventory do hover around lower levels in order to ensure that unrealized sales do not shoot up. Unrealized sales, in a way, is a function determined or defined or driven by the quantum of goods return and the quantum of redundant inventory that builds up into the system. In a way, it's a representation of the brand strategy. What is the level of your unrealized sales, or how much of your production efficiency matches your functional order efficiency or order booking efficiency? How does the value chain match up and the figures match up? And though all of these will decide the level of unrealized sales, and which might now dent the anticipated discounted cash inflows in the time series. Hence, the expertise hired into the project for execution would be required very solidly to focus on the realized sales as well as the unrealized sales because of the factors that I just mentioned. And finally, once again, I will touch upon the topic of new product sales, new innovations. So all of these define the quality of the inflows and the discounted cash flow mechanism, and hence play a very critical role in deciding the profitability of the entire execution of the project. I hope there has been clarity in understanding the quality of inflows and the discounted cash flow mechanism, and would be ready to field questions and queries and ideas into my email, and I would be obliged to respond to you individually as well as collectively for the understanding of all who are into the loop. Thank you, and have a blessed day ahead. God bless.